Yep. Call the meeting to order. Ken, can you call the roll?
Certainly. Dolnitz.
Here.
Burley.
Here.
Almascati.
Here.
Brennan.
Here.
Hageman. Here. Jones.
Here.
McAlexander.
Here.
Full committee of 7.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the agenda. Anybody want to? Okay, got a second?
Before we
Okay.
did that, I just wanted to, and Ken and I had just a brief conversation before the meeting. I think came to a resolution. I'm gonna move to approve the minutes, but, and we had this discussion at council and I was on the other side of the argument, but I'm concerned that with these minutes, we're not capturing some of the things that got said last year that we need to remember, like the consultant gave like an order that he thought the road should be done and
I've got the same concern.
stuff like that. And I think Ken has indicated, not to put too many words in his mouth, but that he would maybe like do, in addition to the minutes, like a summary or something like that. If other people have the same concerns or feel the same way or whatever.
Let's kick it around when we get to the minutes.
Okay,
Okay, any discussion on the agenda?
Did you have a second on the agenda?
Yeah, I got a
I'm
second.
sorry. Okay,
That's
good.
no, I jumped the
the
gun.
power duo over there. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we need approval of the meeting minutes of 2/14. Have a motion?
I'll move.
Okay, second?
Support.
Okay, second. We do need a discussion on an issue that Kurt and I both have. If you want to go ahead and say exactly what your request is.
Well, I don't have any problem at all with what Ken did in terms of like the meeting minutes, because I think minutes, in my view, are supposed to just be very like bullet point, there was a motion, it passed, and who voted for what or whatever. But I view our role in this committee is a little bit different than what we do with council, and that we're like gonna be gathering like facts to try to put together these proposals. And my memory is not that great in terms of like just remembering like that the guy said these 3 roads could go first, and then these 2 roads could go next and all that, or the comments that Tony made during the comment section, I thought were helpful and need to be somehow kept so that we can get at them quickly. And so trying to figure out like a way to do that so that we don't lose like some of what we've learned.
Yeah, I agree that there was a listing that Brad went through and he said, these are the worst condition roads. And then there's another grouping and another grouping. I know several people were trying to write it down. He was speaking really quickly. I know Ken got it because I'm sitting right here watching him. So maybe we could just amend the minutes. Is that your motion?
But I'm fine. Ken suggested he would just do like a meeting summary, and I'm fine with that, just as long as we have some way to make sure we don't forget the information that we've already learned.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would take that even maybe a step further in that we also went around, had comments from us.
Mhm.
And some of the comments as what Tony made were apropos, or at least something that should be said. We're not gonna remember. I hate to say, there's so much going on. But even a quick sentence or two, maybe even a short paragraph that summarizes what that person had brought up. And that way, then we've got something to go back to. Oh, yeah, and that might kick in something else that might work.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend.
And to that point, maybe as soon as those are completed, they could be sent out to us while it's fresh in our minds. We could
Okay.
review it,
Like email.
make any tweaks that it needs.
Yeah.
And then that could be our memorandum on the meeting. If it's not minutes officially, it's at least a memorandum for
Okay,
us.
all right.
Yeah, I don't even know that we need a motion, because I think Ken has already suggested that he and Yev would do that, not to put words in his mouth. I'd rather have him say that, I guess. But
No, that's accurate.
And we can just let him do it, and then we'll, see how the next one comes out and
Okay.
go from there.
All right, except for that issue, we have a motion on the floor for the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public comments for items not on the published agenda. Not yet? Okay, we got our treasurer is here and he's gonna make a presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. For those of you who have not met, I'm Bill Patton, I'm the treasurer. James, I believe I didn't get a chance to meet you and shake your hand, or Eric, but everybody else. Anyway, I'm coming to this meeting because Ken and Kurt actually asked me to pull a couple things together. And I'm all ears. If there's anything else that you need from me to go research or find, I'm more than obviously happy to do that. But as I just sat back and, I pulled some of these numbers before and provided them earlier in this fiscal year to council. And I just want to give you, before I go into the two sheets I provided in the packet, I just wanted to give you some of my thoughts. As I'm looking through this, I think the one question that I would ask, or what I would ask is going into this is, how much do we have and how fast do we need it? Depending upon, what the program is, are we gonna do a portion? Based upon what the engineer's saying, they talked about cul-de-sacs and things like that, of what the process is when you do roads. But whatever this body decides, as their recommendations, one of the things, and I think you probably already considered this, is the way that I look at it is, here's what we have as far as money. How much do we have and how fast do we want to get it done, and what can we do based upon that? And then the only other thing is, and I'm sure that obviously you guys are thinking about a lot of this, is from a treasurer's point of view, my background's not engineering, it's not going and getting bonds, working with bond councils. But there's just a couple of different ways that revenue comes into the village for things, right? The largest is tax revenue, constitutional revenue from the state, and Act 51 money. And obviously the Act 51 money, those are separate accounts and they're restricted to only road use. The village has put money aside in the general fund that we've been saving. That's unrestricted that we can use, and I'll take you through that. But other than that, the only other way is to take on debt through bonds. I had a chance to talk with and go through some of the numbers just to make sure that I'm accurate with our external auditor, who by the way, also audits Franklin. And she was just telling me when they went through, they had 2 bond issuances for 15 years. I believe she said that the first one was in 2000, it was like 2017, 2018. And it was a 15-year bond, and it was for just shy of $15 million. Now, the roads in Franklin, what you have to think is that a lot of it was their main, downtown area, the historic area. A lot of that was streetscape. If you come off of 13 going up Franklin, they redid that entire wall there. But my point is they decided to take on debt. If I went back and I looked at their taxes, so everyone has a distinct line item that they voted for that said, we're taking on debt under a bond, we're gonna pay it off over 15 years, and then they assess that to each of the residents that have parcels within that community. So with that said, I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but looking at it from my perspective, those are the only ways that, you can fund it, unless someone has a more creative way of being able to do that. Selling Girl Scout cookies or something else is not going to pay for what we have here. But anyway, I just will bring you.
Good question.
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
That's okay. So they took a bond out. Did they have existing revenue to pay for that back, or did they have to pass a millage to pay that?
They had to pass a millage. My understanding was they passed the millage and
Is
the
the
voters
millage for
voted
the
on it.
length of the bond?
Yes,
Okay.
yep. And obviously, when they do that, it's specifically the bond council and the bond FA, which is the bond financial advisor. They put all of that together. The cost, everything is my understanding wrapped in. I'm starting to learn more and more and read on bonds. It's all part of that, and it's specifically dedicated. So that money that is brought in is just like an SAD. It can only be used for special assessment bonds. Can only be used money to repay the bond. Can't be used for any other operating expenses. It's very distinct. And it's got to be accounted for separately, and it shows up in each of their tax bills. I went in and started looking at them. It shows up as a distinct line item within their tax bill.
Bill, you indicated they issued 2 bonds.
I believe it was 2 bonds, yeah, the first, I don't know how all the mechanics worked for it, but the first one was, I think it was 8, and then the other one was 5.5, so it
So
was just.
combined is that 13-14 million.
Yes, yes, and I don't know if they, I don't know the whole history of it. I didn't have enough time to really delve into it, but you said the basic is that it's 15 years, they decided to take on the debt. And that it wasn't only for roads, it was for the streetscape, a lot of the stuff for the improvements on the various walls and the,
But they've done a lot of their roads over the past few
Yes.
years.
yeah, that's my understanding. Okay. So if I just bring everyone's attention to the first of the 2 kind of data sheets that I provided. To answer my question, how much do we have? We have $2.759 million currently, okay? And that is made up of, under the restricted funds we have, and this balance is as of audited, these are audited numbers from June 30th of this fiscal year. There's $823,185 in the major road funds and $616,795 in the local road funds. And so just let me step back a second too. Within our village, the way that everything gets dispersed to us from Act 51 money, and when I say Act 51 money, that was originally comes from the state, and they have their own metric and algorithm formula to figure out what they give to us. And I have a little bit on the second sheet of detailing that, but it's broken down into major and local roads. So every expense that comes in, I split it on a percentage basis of what the expense goes to major and what goes to local. In the village of Bingham Farms, we only have 1 major road, and that's Bingham Road. Everything else is local, not including obviously the private roads and the condos, and some of the private roads throughout the village that don't figure into this at all because they're private. So under the general fund, like I said, what we've been doing for the last 3 years is putting, if we have surplus in the budget at the end of the fiscal year, we've been funding $150,000 each year for the last 3 years. So we have $450,000. We are going to try starting the budget right now, but if we, the gist of it is that next fiscal year when we end, if we have a surplus again, we would like to continue that $150,000 each year until things change within the village. The unrestricted fund balance that you'll see, that's $870, is the fund balance of money that we would be able to use that comes out of the general fund. Council would have to approve it. And that number is based upon what we bring in, what our expenses are, and then as treasurer, my personal opinion, state guidelines a little bit different, but I only feel comfortable that I have to have at least 6 months of revenue for operating expenses. That's what I feel comfortable. I have to have at least 6 months float in there. I wouldn't want to go below that because I think that would be, it just wouldn't be a good decision in order to go that. I need to have working capital in order to pay the bills, keep the lights on, and all the services that we provide, trash pickup, recycling, and all of that. So with that said, we're at 2.759. Now, one caveat that I will bring up that's not here, but I just want you to keep it in the back of your mind. The village received ARPA funds during COVID. Now, those ARPA funds can be used for road projects. Our balance right now is about $100,000. What we do now is we have two funds or grants, ARPA and one from Oakland County.
Sorry, ARPA.
ARPA is American Rescue Plan.
Okay, of course.
The federal funding that they gave us. So what we do now is for when our engineers go through and they work on, what's the word I'm looking for, Ken? Infrastructure, thank you. Yes, yes. So we have been using some of those funds to pay infrastructure, Oakland County for the storms, and ARPA for if it, meets the requirements for whatever road projects that they look and do studies and development on. So we have about 100,000, I'm just gonna use that as just a round figure, about 100,000 as of right now, still left in ARPA funds. The thing with ARPA funds that you also need to make sure that you keep in mind is ARPA funds have to be committed with signed contracts on or before December 31st of 24, and the funds have to be spent by December 31st, 2026. So I asked this portion specifically of our external auditor when they say that it has to be committed. And she said, committed are solid signed contracts that you have with whoever, construction company, whoever's going to do and perform the work. That has to be done by December 31st, 2024. Those have to be in place. And then you have till December 31st of 2026 to spend those funds. Now, the answer is what happens if you don't spend them at the end of 26? I don't know. We haven't had any, I don't know if the federal government claws it back, or if they just say, by then it's just like, all right, if it's a smaller balance and you haven't used it, then, just keep it into your general fund balance. I don't know what that is, but I just wanted to make sure, not that $100,000 is going to lay a lot of road, but it's $100,000 that you have that by one way or another, if we need to be able to use it to finish something up, or it's back to my thing of how much do you have and how fast do you need to complete it? It's something that we can look into using.
Is that, sorry, 100,000 that's sitting in an account?
It is.
Okay, so you don't have to apply for it.
So, right. So they gave it to us.
Yeah.
We set it aside, and how we have to account for it is we put it both in expense and revenue.
Okay.
And we can I do the adjustment in the journal entries when the actual expense occurs and takes it out. So right now, we're about $100,000.
And that's in addition to the 2 point.
Yes,
Okay.
the 2.7. So if you want to just keep a round number in mind,
Yeah.
2.86. And earlier in the fiscal year, I told council, I was just doing a round number. I said, we have approximately $3 million to spend on roads. So 2.86 million.
Bill, is any of this money, any of the 2.8, whatever, actually committed anywhere?
No, with the exception of we have plowing, salting, maintenance on the roads, right? That's as a normal expense village. That comes out of the fund balances for major and local roads. So when Johnson Landscaping, does clearing of trees that are down, they go in and they salt, they plow the roads. That's paid out of street prevention and winter maintenance.
Which.
So ARPA could not be used for that?
I would say no.
Not really. My take would be, I don't know for a fact, but I would say no. I think it has to be more of a infrastructure project.
So we couldn't pay HRC out of that.
I do use some ARPA funds for HRC when they do studies, road studies and samples and things like that they bill us. And I don't use all of it. What I do is I take a little bit, and if I could split it, like for instance, if they give us an invoice and they said, we've done study plans on stormwater, and they will tell us on the invoice whether or not it qualifies to use and meets the criteria for the Oakland County grant. What I've been doing is talk to Ken about it, make sure that I fully understand it, and we typically do half and half. I take half the bill out of ARPA and I take the other half bill out of for the storm portion of it, out of the Oakland County grant that we received.
Because we need to have paperwork done by by basically the end of the year.
Yes, contracts, if we were to use the ARPA funds, correct.
But that could even include crack sealing and
I don't think
that
so.
kind of maintenance versus snow plowing and salting.
I'd have to check it out, because I really think I'm not as familiar as I need to be, and like I said, I'm trying to read up on both bonds and the portion of ARPA. And I would obviously reach out to our external auditor and other treasurers to make sure.
Because it seems like $100,000 would be pretty easy to spend, given what we're facing by the end of 2026.
But I'm thinking more of how can we use that money? Because obviously if we don't get a contract for it, for whatever we can use it for, it's gone. And that's why I'm thinking, how can we use it up? Because we won't have elections until the end of the year. So.
Right, that's another, I mean, the time constraint is
Yeah.
closing. So let me do this. I'm just gonna make a note that I'm gonna delve into it and look at.
So the 2.86 really is more like 2.75 or 2.7 because.
Yep. I-
It's,
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I just wanted to call it to your attention because it, I want to make sure that I'm transparent and not say, oh, you know what, I forgot to tell you.
Right.
I don't like surprises, and bad news never, shelf life on bad news, it doesn't get better with time, so I wanted to be.
Is
make
it
sure
fair
that
to
you guys are
say,
aware.
because frankly, when I looked at it, I was surprised because the number 3 million had been talked about.
Yes,
And so I was trying to find a way to get back to the 3 million. If I look at the budget for 24 and look at the budgets where the additional money comes in from Act 51,
mhm,
the money that we think we may have, the $150,000 that would be moved from the general fund to the road fund, if I'm saying that correctly.
or
I
would be
think
used, yes.
I think by the time we actually start perhaps doing something, the fund probably is $3 million or slightly more.
It'd be real close.
Yeah, I think so
Yeah.
too, yeah.
Again, I didn't say Kentucky windage back when, but I
Yeah.
tried to put the numbers together.
Yeah.
Every way I looked at it and I talked to, again, I rely heavily on making sure
Yeah,
that I speak with our external auditor. The reason is because she's been here so long and has a lot of kernel knowledge of what's transpired, right? So every time I came up, it was like, well, we're just, yeah,
I
about
think we're
$3 million,
about
yep,
there.
right in that area.
Okay.
One of the other things I'll just go through quickly unless you obviously have questions. There are some, and I asked this question, we have assigned road emergency funds and assigned sewer emergency funds. So we have currently $300 in road emergency and $200,000 in sewer. So we couldn't use the sewer for storm drains or the roads. Those are, specifically earmarked for sewer issues. But I believe the council does have the ability, if they want to take some of the emergency road funds and spend it, it's council's prerogative and decision to be able to do that. Now, the one thing that I get cautioned by is like, okay, that's fine, it's 300,000, but that's gotta also, there's a sinkhole that happens, or you need to do hot patch cold, or cold hot patch in the road, or things like that come up. That's what those emergency funds obviously are for, but I just, again, wanted to point it out so that you're aware of all the data points of what's currently out there. Any questions so far? Kurt?
So Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but the major road fund, it's really difficult to get the money out of there to spend like on local roads. Am I correct on that?
You are correct.
So when we say 2.759 for all the other roads other than Bingham, it's 2.759 minus the 823.
Yeah, so
Practically, right?
the rule, when I spoke to Raina about the rule is we can transfer 50% of Act 51 money from one fund to the other, so we can't do more than 50%. So what she said was, if you look at it, we can take 50% of Act 51 money that comes in that we get for major, because when they disperse it to us, they disperse it and they give me a distinct line item and they say, this is how much is in major, this is how much is in local, and it depends upon, we've got 5.2 miles of road in the village, and Bingham is the only major road, but you're able to take up to 50, no more than 50% and transfer it. And she said, what we normally like to do, depending upon the condition of Bingham, is you could do 50% of that's in that Act 51 money and move it to the local roads.
Okay, was it just 50% of the Act 51 money then, or the reason I'm asking that is because I know that prior to 3 years ago, we were putting the $150,000 instead of putting it in a general road fund, it was going to the major road fund and the local road fund. So some of the reason it's 823 is because for probably, I don't know how many years before, 3 years ago, we were putting it in a chunk of money. We, the village, were putting in a chunk of money that wasn't coming from the state. Do you know and if you don't know, maybe you can just find out for us. Like,
I will ask.
that other money,
I
like,
will
can we
ask.
transfer that around or?
Yes, I will ask that specific and get you the answer. I do know this, but you're right. There was, I did have a conversation that said before, we were putting like 125,000 We put 125,000 in fiscal year 15-16, and then we broke it out. We started putting 150,000, we were separating it 75-75. If I went back and looked at
Right.
how it was split, so 75 major, 75 local, and we've been doing that since like 2017-18 fiscal year. So, but I will ask that specific question. That's a good question.
Right, I just bring it up because if we decided we wanted to do Bristol Road or whatever that was and the other little Sager Court and all that, we wanted to do that first, it would be harder to get some of that 823 to.
Right,
to-
out over to the local.
Right.
Let me know, make a note of that.
You're, just so I'm sure, what you're asking. Major road fund restricted. The Act 51 dollars. Is completely restricted, only 50% of that can be moved.
Right,
And you're asking for whatever the remainder is,
right,
that the village put
Put
it,
in.
not that the state sent to the village.
correct.
Okay,
I'm sorry for the delay. I'm just making a note so that I don't forget. Okay.
One more question if I could, Bill, on your
Yeah.
numbers. There's an unassigned general fund balance of $1.1 million. Maybe you answered that earlier, wanting to have 6 months of working capital reserve, but is that unassigned general fund? Is that, could the council decide where they want to assign that up to their discretion?
That is the unassigned general fund balance of 1.1737, and that number is. That represents the 8 months of annual operating expense
Okay,
that I
so that's what you
need to
said
keep
earlier.
to make, yes, so that I could sleep at night and not,
And then, and so
Constantly
the
wake up.
870 is what you would be comfortable with,
yes,
still have plenty of reserve.
exactly,
Okay.
that's exactly right, yeah. I enjoy my sleep and I'm constantly thinking about it, right? So it's like, all right, I need to, I'm fiduciary and make sure that I'm doing the right thing for the village and with taxpayer money.
Okay.
So it's like, I would, I wouldn't be able
No,
to
that's-
sleep right if I needed that.
That's the perfect answer for me.
Because there's a lot of things, even since I've come here, I mean, I've only been here a year now, but I'm finding things that's like, oh, all of a sudden we're getting a bill from like this, what's that for? It's because one, I wasn't here when that happened, and I go through and you look at the budget, but you don't, unless you're here day to day and you see everything that gets invoicing or whatever, we have power outage, right? We had the power outage, and all of a sudden our copier printer fax went out, and we had to have it repaired, so it's like, that's an unexpected expense
That's
that we
right.
don't budget for, so. Things like that kind of sneak up, and because of that, I'm saying 6 months will at least bridge me to where I feel comfortable, okay? Any other questions before I move to the second document?
So the road funds, major and minor, all comes from Act 51, so the 823 and the 616 all came from Act
The
51.
majority of it has, but as trustee Jones had indicated that prior to that, the village was putting money into both major and local funds that were in addition to the Act 51 money. They were taking it out of the general fund and moving it into,
So there was some of the village's money in the 823 and 616?
yes, my understanding is correct. And then what we did was they looked at it and said, all right, you know what? If we're doing it and we're putting it in those distinctive, easy for me to say, accounts, and they're locked and they can only be used for it, why don't we change our approach and say, let's start funding under the general account, which is not restricted. Council could do whatever they want to do with that money, right? And since it's unrestricted, that gives us a little bit more flexibility, so that if we decide that we want to use those funds to do Bristol Lane because it's local, we're not tied and said, you know what? That's a local road. You can't take that money from it because it's, earmarked for major. You can't move it. You can't move it between
understand.
both
I
accounts.
understand.
Okay.
But you know how much what came from Act 51 and how much is from the.
Yeah, I'd have to go back even further to see, of the fund balance, specifically how much it is, and I have to go back and make sure that I'm capturing it, how far back when they actually started inputting into major and local out of the general fund. And how much was Act 51. What I presented to you on the second, I'm gonna say slide, that shows, kind of shows my age, but the second sheet, acetate, right, foils, going way back. But I only went back a
As
certain.
long as you don't say mimeograph.
Mimeograph, yeah, or Scan Master instead of fax machine, right? I only went back a couple of fiscal years. I'd have to go back further to really make sure that I get the correct proper split. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then, again, just, none of this is committed except for what you defined in that you're holding aside for the conversation you're holding aside so you can sleep 6 months, but the assigned road project of 450,000.
That's in the general fund.
What is that assigned to?
It is in the general fund and it's assigned to road. So that was what council said, let's start putting for the future, let's start saving if we have it at the end of
So
our
this
budget.
This is, they already made that switch to not put it into the road
Yes,
fund.
yeah, when we did that 3 years ago, we started doing that in,
So that's what assigned road fund means, okay.
correct, we started doing that in fiscal year 2021. So we've done it in fiscal year 2021, 21, 22, and 22, 23. Because we just ended this June fiscal year and we had enough surplus in the budget where I transferred over. I just actually did that to make sure I did we did it to close the books, but I just actually did the mechanicals within the system so that my books reflect that it's 450,000. And if we have another 150 surplus, currently, the assumption is that we would go ahead and contribute another 150, so that would give us 600,000. But that would be fiscal year ending June 30th of this year. And then obviously after a law, we have to get the audited numbers.
Just curious, how does the state determine how much to put in each fund of major, minor?
It is a calculation and formula that they do. Quite frankly, I'm not going to be anything other than honest to you. They send me the disbursement report. I really haven't had time to sit down and go through. There's an actual report that asserted that I have to fill out by the middle of April. So I was planning on, as this is going on, planning on spending some time with the folks that are in that department, in that area, to be able to better understand what the actual formula is of how there is a calculation. I just am not familiar with, I don't know if it goes by population size. I know that it's obviously by the amount of roads that you have. And then I don't know what else figures into that, calculation.
Yeah, it would be based on road size.
Yes.
I can tell you that I've looked at the formulas. There are two different formulas, one for major roads and one for local roads, and they're extremely convoluted and complex. And I looked at it, my eyes glazed over, and I didn't really want to get too much more into it than that. It's
Okay.
Okay, if you look at just some actual numbers, it looks like the village received $85,000 of Act 51 money in 2022 for major road, the only major roads, Bingham Road. And then about $43,000 in Act 51 money from everything else. So it's a good bit of money every year that this delivers. But most of it goes to Bingham Road.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because
That makes sense.
it's 2 miles out of 5.5.
1 mile,
1 mile,
Yeah.
what's 1 mile?
1 mile.
But it is the most
20%.
active
Yes.
of all the roads. So.
Okay. The second slide is pretty self-explanatory, and I was just asked to put some numbers together of saying, okay, what are the road project expense by fiscal year that we've had? And then also, Act 51 revenue versus expense. What have we done? And I broke it out: major road revenue, major road expense, local road revenue, local road expense, and then obviously total revenue, total expense. What I didn't do on this, and I apologize, is I was trying to do, and I just did it quickly here before the meeting. I wanted to look at what the averages were over the fiscal years. But one of the things that Ken pointed out is, if you're going through, and what popped out to me is like, it's like, well, what happened in fiscal year 2021? Because we had a total expense of $106,557, which is a little bit out of the median as you go look back at, what the expenses were from fiscal 17-18. You go through and all of a sudden it pops up to 100, we're at 54, 70, 63. And this is the fourth line down from the top. And then it goes to 106. And what it was is we did have, I don't want to say substantial, but there was an active road project that obviously caused that expense to go to 106. And then you'll see it came back down, and then 22, 23, it was at 86, 88.6.
So how are these, maybe this is a question for you, Ken, how is this allocated? Is it just you bring is this discretionary, how it's spent as far as, repairs, or is this preventative, or what are they doing?
Based upon recommendations from our engineers, for example, that 2020 project, this is it right here. This is the entire thing. This is the bid, and this is the specs of everything that will be done this year. This was hot mix asphalt street repair for basically portions of Bingham Road, portions of Bristol Lane, portions of Bristol Court.
Yeah.
And
So
that's-
every year you ask them
Mhm.
to do an assessment of the roads.
Right,
and
exactly.
They're coming in, and this is where they're doing some preventative maintenance type work, right?
This is a partnership with Beverly Hills. This particular year, they had their public safety building parking lot redone. And we piggyback similar to the concept that you brought up, Tony, last meeting about getting economy of scale, which Brad also mentioned.
Right. So this is like 106, and he said you wanted something like in the neighborhood of a couple $100,000, and so you've got it with Beverly Hills and got the discount for having it, over that 200,000 threshold, right?
I guess it's a discount.
Yeah, it's cheaper on the private
Right,
contractor.
you're right, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's 2020. Do you do the same thing these other years, or is this some other type of maintenance?
This is, that's the last project of that kind that we've done. That's
So like in 2020, 21 and 22, you've got 60,000 in 21 and 21, 22, and then 86,000 in 22, 23. So how was that spent?
Do you have the handle on that?
I'm sorry. You were asking if you can just repeat your question.
I'm
please.
just looking at the Act 51 money that was spent here. Ken gave us the whole book there, obviously very
Mhm.
detailed what was done in 2021. What's the equivalent of how we decided to spend money in 21, 22, and 23, 22, 23?
It would be the same thing. There's a lot of invoices that come in for the pothole refills from that Beverly Hills does with us. The other things that come out of that is, the various things on different road projects. It does come out when I pay for land, for the snow removal, salting, things like
Okay,
that.
so we can do snow removal with Act 51 money.
Yeah, so the invoices that come in when they plow, I take that and separate what that invoice is and distribute it take the expense between both major and local
Okay.
and split it out. So that's what is
So
reflected.
snow removal, and then we have Beverly Hills come through and fills our potholes, and you pay those invoices out of that.
Yep. Yes, yep.
Thank you.
So I apologize, James, for not listening. I was again just making some notations. Other than that, I mean, if you're looking at the average for the total spent over all those fiscal years it's averaging at $73,530 on average over 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 fiscal years. And then again, on the bottom is, again, the Act 51, I just broke it out so that you guys have a flavor for where it is, how much it is, and how it's coming in, into what revenue versus expenses. So hopefully that's something that you guys will find helpful and can refer back to as you're going through and devising what the plan is or what the plan should be.
What have you forecast or budgeted for this year?
For this coming fiscal year,
Correct.
that's just starting.
Let's just start.
Mhm.
So we don't have a 24 number yet,
24, 25 number, no.
or is it 23, 24?
It would be, we're in,
23, 24
Yes.
now.
yes.
So you know what
So-
you're expecting in terms of Act 51 money and what we're gonna spend?
Well, no, I mean, I could go back and look at it compared to, they send every month and it runs 2 months behind.
Okay,
So I'll get a report and it says earning months and it's like, I'll get it 2 months behind. So I don't have an actual number, but I can get that for you as
well, I'm
well.
just curious to see how, you know, the revenue side is growing.
And what we don't have in here too is, I mean, from 17-18 to 22-23, cost of materials is probably almost double.
I would say that would be a good assumption. Not double, but definitely increased, right? And that's another thing too, you know, when I was talking about it, said, I asked questions like, okay, well, why did Franklin bond it and decide to take on debt? Because personally, I'm one, I don't like any debt in my personal life. So that kind of carries through. And the answer is that I guess they look at it and say, okay, if we can bond it and we can sign contracts, right? And you pay on milestones as you go, you're locking in on that price, knowing that everything, gas, you know, who knows, diesel goes up, everything seems like it's going up, it doesn't go down, right? So that's one of the things that may have been a factor, one of the many variables that they considered. I don't know, I haven't, but that's what I would assume, that's what I would surmise.
I bring that up just because HRC did say that they're planning in, or kind of, I guess, planning in 4% increase in costs for every year that this continues. So
They,
That might be too
what
much.
crystal ball do they have?
Yeah.
They can determine.
that, again, that was an estimate on their part.
It might be overstated, but they'd rather be high than low.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It could be, you know, empirical data that they've had from the past, but you know, the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh my God, just take a look at healthcare costs, right? It's like, who would think that it would keep going at the rate that it's going? You would think that you have it covered when you sit down and try to budget, and all of a sudden it's like, you get the big surprise, it's like, oh.
I don't think you can project healthcare onto road construction.
No, but my point is that, you know, it's, I don't wanna say an exact science, I mean, to use your words, it's the crystal, you'd have to have the crystal ball, and if
Yeah.
you did, then we would, the answers to us would be a lot
Just
easier.
Hope the treasury keeps it at 2%, right?
He's working on his crystal ball. over
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, is there anything else that you guys, and of course, you don't, if you think of it or whatever, I'm here, just feel free, but if there's anything else that comes in mind other than what I've notated and talked about that you want me to
Just
take
a
a look
couple
at.
of questions about the Franklin bonds. That you said they did it in 2017.
I think she said it was 2017, 20, you know what, I think they may be referring to 2017, 2018 budget year.
So that's when interest rates were extremely low.
Yeah, exactly.
So they probably got extremely good, 2-3%.
Oh, yeah.
But 2-3%, yeah, 2-3%. Yeah. So
Student loan
better
rates.
than inflation.
Student
It's
loan.
not low.
Student loan rates back in the late 90s.
Okay, any other discussion on this?
Thank you. I will follow up on some of the questions that you guys asked me to look into. Appreciate it.
So can I ask a question that's not on the presentation?
You can ask as many questions as you want, whether I have an answer or not.
In this package, Ken, that you gave us, you had in here how much a millage increase would fund on this page right here. Are you familiar with this, Bill?
I'm
You
not-
are, you helped me
Okay.
put this together. You don't have it in front of you.
Well, you know what I don't have in front of me, what I do have though, is the State Tax Commission Assessment Roll Board of Review that happened last year. That tells me exactly what total real property was, what total personal property was, And for every 1 mil increase, based upon these numbers that were for tax year 2023, for every 1 mil increase, both for real and personal property, actually for total real property, we would bring in an additional like $195,371. So call it, $195,000.
So it's 261 here.
It was 204, but that's based upon total revenue, which would include not only total real property and total personal property, but it's total real and personal property. So parcels you have that you own your house, right? That's real property. Then there's the commercial district, that's real property, the buildings, but then they own assets, copiers, faxes, things that they get assessed for on that portion. And there's exemptions that involve in it. If it was less than 80,000 and now it's between 80,000 and 180, they can apply to exempt it on a yearly basis if it's near the less than 180,000. So that's going to change the revenue that we bring in on a tax basis.
So the latest calculation is 195.
Yep.
Per mil.
Yes, and again, I want to be real clear, that's based upon, that was based upon what,
This is what he's looking at.
Yeah.
right here.
yep, 190, exactly. See, look at, isn't that
I
great?
know.
190, I just lost it. My eyes are going bad. Yes, 195, 371, 195, 371, see? Treasurer's got a foot.
In balance. Okay, you're good.
Yes, thank you.
But just to be clear, the balance, the number that we're talking about, 190 something to this 260 something. The difference is the property taxes.
The difference is personal property versus real property.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, personal property.
Yes.
So then basically what you're saying is, we increase 1 mil, it'd be 195,000, if my math is correct, 2 mil would be 390,000. And 3 mil would be 585,000, a little over $500,000.
It's right here. This one's right.
Yep.
We've already published.
Yep.
Okay.
We've already published and I spent, as you remember, time with Oakland County to make sure that everything was what it was based upon the numbers that we had at the time. And again, as you remember, that figure, just keep in mind, people can go to the tax tribunal to have their taxes or property assessment, their taxable value reduced. Sometimes it gets increased. There's puts and takes to it. So we go, only thing I'm doing is going based upon what the tax commission assessment roll certification was that we get. And then that's kind of what I use as a gauge when I'm doing the budget to say, okay, how much revenue are we expecting in from that area? And again, it's a budget. It's not, I don't want to say it's dark magic, but it's not a specific science where it's an exact. A budget is a budget. Sometimes you come in and you have surplus. Sometimes you're over on certain areas.
It's an estimate.
Correct. Thank you, sir.
Okay, everybody good? Thanks, Bill.
You're more than welcome.
All right, now we have a presentation from Hassan. He's an expert in this area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I wanted to do was just share a few notes that I put together on financing alternatives, maybe to help move this conversation forward and drill down to some ideas that are more traditional market-based financing alternatives, some that are non-market or let's say a bit more creative that I've been thinking about, that I've seen utilized in the past. Let me just pass this up.
How funny,
Do you need copies, man?
Got 10 copies. It should be.
Like in school, that's take one, pass
There
it
you
on.
go.
Wonderful. Again, you're on.
So I just thought, first, it's important to set a bit of context, and at least to share the considerations that I think about, some of which we just talked about with Bill. So obviously determining the amount of funding required is a critical first step. We talked about this 2.7 or 2.8 that's available. We know that the challenge that we have is greater than that if you're trying to solve all the road problems or road reconstruction. So I'm assuming a number between 8 to 10 million that eventually we're gonna have to solve to be able to do all the roads. Depending on timing, that's something that, of course, that Bill mentioned as well. You can look at a combination of both short-term and long-term funding solutions. Some will take longer than others to develop, but are still very worthwhile in pursuing. And some are just good funding programs or ideas that we should consider establishing on a permanent basis and an ongoing basis, because you're still gonna have to think about the future even after you've solved this problem. And then lastly, in terms of just the numbers, I'm not gonna touch on that point because we just covered it with Bill, but in terms of what is really available, how much do we have from the current resources at the village? So looking at the traditional or market-based financing alternatives, obviously the most easiest and straightforward thing to do would be to increase the millage and raise taxes. But I think as we just heard, the very last part of the conversation was about the fact that even if we increased it by 3 millage points, you're talking about maybe 600,000-700,000 of extra revenue coming in. That's not gonna solve the problem. That's not gonna get us close to the kind of numbers we need to look at. A bond issuance that leverages what I saw as excess revenue potentially or excess amounts in the budget might allow us to raise 3 to 5 million without necessarily putting up the millage by anything more than 1 point. And I'm assuming that if we are able to get a municipal type rate, we're somewhere in the 4 to 5% if we're lucky to do a 5 to 10-year bond based on recent issuances that we've seen. On number 3, it's more of a statement and question. So obviously there are federal, state and grant funding programs. I don't know what we've explored so far, and I don't know, Bill, if you can comment on that, but there are a number of programs out there that we can look at. So I don't know if that's been explored yet.
I have not.
Yeah, okay,
No, we've sort of done that. We've sort of done that with
Okay.
HRC,
okay.
but, yeah.
I mean, we can get into what those actual programs are, but I just wanted to know, put it out there that those exist, right? In terms of infrastructure lenders, I think that's always a good place to also start to solve for some of the amount. So, for example, the state of Michigan has the State Infrastructure Bank that lends up to $2 million for road projects. The most recent precedent for that is Beverly Hills. They completed a $2 million loan last year. It's actually a relatively quick process in terms of what I've seen. Usually takes between 2 to 3 months from application to get a decision. And most of the time, if you're meeting their requirements, you'd be successful. The rate is capped at a slightly subsidized rate. So again, in this market environment, I'd still expect us to fall in the 4 to 5% range. But again, that's a quick source of $2 million if we wanted to go after it. And then lastly, there's obviously private infrastructure funds. So similar to infrastructure banks, there's a number of funds out there that actually lend to infrastructure projects. Again, terms are to be negotiated depending on risk profile and project type. Looking at the non-market strategies, these are just things that I've started to think about in terms of what we can do outside of what is a typical approach, and thinking about a long-term way of sustaining funding for potentially road and infrastructure in the village, but could be brought into economic development as well. I don't know what the level of engagement has been with local businesses. There's significant precedent for municipal councils going to local businesses to contribute to these kinds of things, or approaching corporates in Michigan. A big one that actually is approached quite frequently across the country are utility providers. Utility providers run their lines through the village's territory. We don't charge them money for that. We let them do it, obviously to provide a service, but they're a stakeholder in our infrastructure here too. And then lastly, I called it philanthropic contributions, but the reality is that in this village there are several individuals that have the net worth to be able to make contributions to a fund of this type. And if they haven't been engaged or we haven't written letters to them to inform them of what we're doing, then that's some action that we can also take. to be able to make that approach, and I'm sure you'll get a positive response. Can't say how much, but I'm sure you'll get a positive response. The second one, which is a new and interesting area, is what's called smart infrastructure financing. This is something that in the state has actually been spearheaded by the University of Michigan. There's a center called the Center for Smart Infrastructure Finance, led by Professor Peter Adrians, who I know very well. And he'd be happy to come in and talk about the work they do if that would be of interest. But the smart infrastructure area uses technology, primarily sensor data, to look at how to finance assets and infrastructure projects better. So that may be in the form of tracking the vehicles coming in and out, just vehicle movement on the different roads that we have, and being able to price from an investor point of view, to price the return on that investment accordingly. And that's a whole other area in terms of the investor universe that you could approach, that ranges from investors that are in the crypto space all the way to fintech investors. And there you may have seen recently things like electrified roads and electrified charging that, I believe a pilot program in Detroit was recently the beneficiary of one of those. But that's, again, that's something that opens up a whole other area in terms of access to grants, investors and partnerships, as well as a couple of federal grants from the Department of Transportation that fund projects that study smart roads, as it's called. So if that's something you want to explore and spend time on, and again, these things take time. It doesn't have to be solved for the first million or two that we're trying to raise, but it can certainly be something that we can put on the agenda. And then lastly, in terms of the last area where I've done some work for a number of different projects, is actually politically engaging on things like appropriation and assistance, both at the state level as well as with our congressional representatives, to be able to get budget allocations that go to local agencies that are specifically designating the funds for use in, let's say, a road project in Bingham Farms. That can be done. It takes time, but it can be done. And you mentioned, Kurt, we had the Congresswoman here
Right.
last week, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right. So again, we need to write to the different stakeholders, engage the different stakeholders to be able to pursue that kind of strategy.
Right, I think, if I remember correctly, I think our village manager actually talked with her about our road situation when she came to visit the office. So we've already done a little bit of that, but we certainly haven't seen a check.
And so I wanted to just settle these ideas out. These are not obviously fully exhaustive. We can add to them as other members of the committee would like, but I just thought I'd give us a start in terms of things to think about.
Good, thanks. Any questions?
How much do you know about the State Infrastructure Bank? That one really caught my idea, or my mind. Is that, I don't know of it at all. Is that fairly common that they?
Yeah, I mean, there's limits on how much they'll fund. So the 2 million is a hard cap. But the rest of the terms are to be negotiated. So typically they'll give loans for 20 years. But if you want a shorter term loan, they'll do that too. And they've actually been softening their requirements. So it used to be that it had to be a major road, highway, rail type project. Now they're, really giving out funds to support the reconstruction of roads in Michigan. The funding that went to Beverly Hills actually went for sidewalk reconstruction.
Wow, so that would be a way to raise like a quick
Yep.
2 million if we need. We still have to pay it back, obviously,
Of
over
course.
time, but.
But 20-year funding. Yeah.
All right.
But interest, what's it gonna cost?
It will be they say it's a market interest rate that is subsidized. So I can't really say, right?
Yeah.
But we'll only get that quote once we engage with them, once we talk to them. They haven't been approached yet.
It was interesting, the Franklin bond. It's 15 million. And the cost of that bond, what they ended up with was 13.8 something. It cost $1,552,413. So when you talk about bonds, that was just to prepare the bond, not the repayment. That's what it costs, to do the administration. So if you're, and that's 15 mil. So what's the interest on the bond? And what is it gonna cost per year, 15 years, 15 million to pay that back?
My guess is that it's going to be a minimum of 5%, and that's optimistic,
Mhm.
right?
Which equates to what number?
Depends how much we're raising.
15.
If we're raising 15, then
Just go for
it's
that.
750,000 per year.
I also think to just keep in mind too, again, I'm not an expert in bonds. I used to work along with someone that was in the bond council at a bank, but they can structure it as well to say, do you want to pay more interest up front, or do you want to pay more principal up front? So they, instead of just straight line over the 15 years, there's ways that they can work to structure it differently based upon your outlook and how you want to pay it back.
And then I think given that we don't need all the funds from day one, there is time to look at a combination of options to minimize your cost. Right, so some of it can come in the form of bond issuance, some of it can be in the form of the state infrastructure bank loan, some of it could be in the form of grants and working with smart infrastructure financing. We have time. It just depends how much you want to solve at the beginning.
So if I do this right, the $15 million bond at 5% for 15 years, 750,000 a year would cost us 11 million, the fees for it, $11,250,000. You would have to pay in addition to,
Well, that's the interest,
yeah,
that's the interest.
so, and plus the
Well, you're paying
1,152,000.
down principal over there, so.
Well, it's a bond where you're paying the coupon.
Well, that's right.
Mhm.
So it's you're paying the whole amount every year.
Well, you're only paying the interest, you're not paying the principal. Right. So what most
So
municipal,
you're paying the whole 750 every year for
correct,
the 20 years or whatever.
correct, yeah. But here's the thing, the secret that, people don't talk about is the fact that municipal government typically is financing itself on a rolling basis, meaning that you take out a $10 million bond in 20 years when it matures, you're not repaying it back, you're just replacing it with another $10 million bond.
We've never, I don't know that we've ever done that. I think that might be something.
So it becomes perpetual.
Becomes perpetual if obviously there's no other way to settle that bond, right? So you're just refinancing,
Okay.
right?
But the bond issuer will let you do that. I thought that
That's the nature of the bond market, yeah.
they'll let you
Oh, yeah.
issue without.
They just keep making money.
Well, Jim, you know why, they're making 11 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course they're gonna reissue.
They'll make the village go bankrupt.
I mean, it's basically no differently to how, people refinance their homes, right? Pay down, refinance.
Some people.
Some people.
Yeah,
some
not
people.
everybody, but that would be perpetual debt.
But that's
We live with
perpetual-
perpetual debt
Correct.
as well.
Correct.
So to try to get back, Bill, are you, what's the, I know that the council can raise the interest rate on a vote of the council if it wanted to, up to a certain level.
I
What
believe
is
it's 12. Yeah, the mill rate, I think we're allowed to go to 12.
12? And after that, you need a vote, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And we're at 9 right now.
We're at 9 and have been for the last, I believe, 5 years.
Is there a way, and I know you're all at the beginning of this, of first determining various scenarios, and, I heard some of what you were saying, Mason, but to elongate how much, if we did these projects in a certain direction and over a certain period of time, and how much we would need to additionally cover those without any bond or anything. Because what we heard last time was these roads do not have to be done immediately. And some are in, better condition than others. So I'm assuming you guys are going to come up with the alternatives of here, if we do these roads, here's when we have the money to do it. If we do these roads, it'll be this point. Is that, am I following that correctly?
Yeah, that's called laddering, and, yeah, and that's the reason why we need the extra information from Brad from last time, so we can prioritize what's worse. If I make myself clear.
No,
Well, one of the things he said is to maintain the roads at the current Paisley rating, you need to, according to the state formula, you need to spend $150,000 a year just to maintain the current.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Corridor.
apparently, right?
No,
Yeah.
we're not
But
doing
we're
that.
spending 60 or 70, yeah.
They were not spending $150,000 on
Every once in a while.
preventative maintenance. We're not doing that.
Oh, I got it.
Yeah. But we're putting it in, so it is there.
It is
Right.
there,
It is there, right?
the 450.
Yes.
Well, the 150 a year.
So I
So
thought
you
this
could
was,
stay at theoretically at the poor and average rating or fair rating at 150,000 until we're ready to fund it.
I thought this was very helpful. Thanks
Yeah,
for
it is.
your working to help on this. I view that we're gonna have to come up with like, since that's our mission, like between 3 and 5, like scenarios and there's a lot here to digest and I'm gonna do that over the before our next meeting, but it seems to me like one of the scenarios would be do nothing. You know, a do nothing scenario, and I think that's why a lot of the things that Bill showed us in terms of like how much Act 51 funding we get and how much expenses we get and all that sort of stuff. I think one scenario ought to be like, if we just kick this can down the road for 5 years, where would we be? And we could take like averages of how much the 151 revenue is and how much we're paying to fill potholes and stuff like that. And it seems like a second option would be to do the plan that the consultants talked about with just maintaining the road, just doing this preventative maintenance, which is apparently more than doing nothing. It's $150,000 a year more than doing nothing. It seems like that could be a second like option that we could consider. And then we have to go to like, well, what if we just raise the millage 3 mills or put it on the ballot to, or put it on the ballot to 4 mills?
We could go forward without putting on the ballot.
Where would,
No,
Three.
We're at 9 right now, we can go to 12. Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah, that's
my
right.
math is incorrect, sorry.
shoot, boy, I thought I was.
It is.
I thought you were losing it.
Yeah. So 3 mills, and would, you know, what would that option look like? And then maybe there's a fourth option that is, you know, a bond / infrastructure bank type option. And a fifth option that I think ought to be one that we consider, in part because we have so many people on private roads, and I think this is going to be so hard to sell to private road people. Although we had a couple of very good suggestions last meeting about maybe how to go about that, but it has to do with an option that would include a special assessment. And by that, I mean, and I think Birmingham does this with their roads, where you actually like assess the people on the road to pay part of the cost. And certainly we wouldn't need to assess them for all of the costs because we already have $2.875 million or whatever it is. And certainly you would think that we would be able to continue making at least $150,000 out of the yearly budget like we have been. So it wouldn't need to be all, but maybe if, you know, maybe if they were paying part of it, and I don't know how much part of it, because you can't make it too high, because if you say they're gonna have to spend $40,000 of their own money for their road, then they're gonna vote against it, you know, so I'm not suggesting.
But that would also be spread over 15 or 20 years.
Well, you could do it that way, I think, you could do it that way.
Yeah.
And the ordinances allow for special assessments. Either if a street right now could come, Bristol Road could come to us and say they want a special assessment for their road. And we could do it that way, or it could be done through, it could be required, the village could require it. Now, I don't know that anybody, well, I shouldn't say for anybody other than myself, but I don't know that I'd want to vote for anything like that at a council meeting. I think that that would be something you would want everybody to vote on, at a election. But that would seem to be like another option. And then I'm certainly not suggesting those are the only options. I'm just throwing those out there as 4 or 5 that I've thought of, and I'd love to hear other options, because I'm not sure any of the ones that I just mentioned are perfect.
Well, if you could formalize and summarize those ideas, I think that would be a good thing for us to discuss formally.
Could you restate option 4?
I'm not sure which one I should.
The bond issue.
The getting alternative financing, the bond, the infrastructure bank we just heard about today.
I mean, if you've got 2.7 and you get $2 million from the SIB at 6%, let's say, that's 120,000 a year, which will give you short of $5 million, which is 50% of salary.
It goes a long way.
Goes a long way.
Because I think that's part of the answer too has to be, do nothing's one extreme, the other extreme is do it all at the same time. If there's going to be,
In the middle.
it's gonna be something in the middle.
I think another thing we should think about too, if we do go for a vote, whether it be for special assessment and or for a bond issue, that we have a backup if it doesn't go. As Kurt was saying, you might have half the village that are on private roads say, nope, we're not gonna go do that. We have to cover our own roads. So then we have another backup that we could go. So that's another possibility.
Might
So
be
as you-
0.3.
Or 2.3 or 3.3, yeah, or 3 point, yeah, whatever, yeah. I said, we all know that we can increase 3% or 3 mils. That gives us X amount. At that point, now we can go ask the village, can we go more? But at the same time, have kind of a backup that if it doesn't go, all right, we've got the 3 mil and we go with that. We also know that, as you were saying, that HRC gave us, okay, this is what would take for this road, this road, this road. We know that if, let's say we did Bristol Lane, we would need to do the tributaries for that first, then do Bristol Lane. That might take a 3-year, 4-year period.
Easy.
So now we can spread that.
That's
So
right.
we got a lot of work to do. Then as that doing that 3 or 4 years, because we know it takes at least a year to even get contracts out and so forth. So we handle those roads, that's year 1, year 2, and then year 3 or 4, now we do, okay, so now we've spent maybe 200 or 2.5 or maybe 3 million. Well, that's over that many years. And then the other roads, we've done crack seal and so forth, which takes that 150. So there's another scenario that we certainly can think about. And then as we go on to year 6, 7, 8, 9, now we handle the other roads with that money that we would then have.
And we've got these normal inflows that we're collecting right now.
Correct.
So that's additive to that.
Right.
So,
And with the thought that once the roads get up to a better maintenance than what we have now, maybe then the village can say, or council can say, you know what? Let's be nice, let's drop back to 11 mils, let's drop back to 10. Can we still, with Bill's expertise and say, you know what, we can do that, we can function with that less money and still have enough to cover.
The problem we face then is, I'm not sure who said it, maybe it was Mason, but by the time we finish what we just talked about, you're gonna just be starting over again. So how are you gonna be making
Yeah.
sure you're planning to have a fund the next time around?
I think that's one of your concerns
Yeah,
too.
it's a big concern.
So long-term maintenance versus short-term.
Yeah, so I think the solution is, you answer the challenge that we have now, but you're also preparing for
Correct.
the future, right? So
Right.
this is not gonna go away.
No,
It's for.
Yeah. This committee may be a long term.
So I mean, maybe I hear people saying, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe another option is do the preventative maintenance program and pick one road or two roads like
Mhm.
Bristol, like the subsidiaries of Bristol Road and Bristol Road, and plan for just that.
Because the money is there for that.
And then like 3 or 4 years from now, decide how to do the rest. I mean, that, I suppose that could be another option.
Again, yeah, you were saying a long-term plan versus a short-term plan.
Right, I mean, you could just focus on.
Yeah, almost in perpetuity, to forever.
Right, or if you don't wanna take this to a vote this year, you just do the 1 mil, which you can do,
Yes,
right, without a vote.
yes.
You use those funds to get the loan. Then you've got just short of $5 million. You don't have to go to a vote.
And start doing stuff.
True.
I think you gotta be upfront with the village and tell them that
This
is
is
gonna
what
come
we're doing.
due, and that they have to pay
Sure.
for it, which means a millage increase, so.
We're at the village here.
But you were, doing one mil now and then it's down the road, you're gonna have to raise it 3 mils. You've gotta be upfront to everybody, say,
This is what's gonna happen.
this is what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a matter of
Yeah.
how you wanna, handle time.
I think you can be transparent to the village
Oh, absolutely.
and not necessarily put it on ballot.
Yes.
But let's remember, these are recommendations that you're gonna be making to council.
Correct.
Council will be making that determination on it,
Yeah.
and they will make that announcement when the time comes. And if we're talking about multi-years down the road, I can only assume that the faces on council will change to some degree,
Yeah.
and thinking might change as well.
And this council
So-
may change.
Yeah,
Right.
and I'm just being realistic about that portion of it, and
Yeah.
I'm not trying to read into anything. I mean, if you structure it so that the financing is sort of dependent upon the thinking of council just to raise millage rates, that to me, that's not much of a recommendation. I'm just,
But there's a need. It's not like it's just
Yeah,
right,
arbitrary.
that's true.
It's not like we're doing it, but just to raise money. We're doing it because that money is needed for.
But it goes back to the start of the discussion. At the end of the day, there's only gonna be a few ways to raise revenue.
Correct.
I think Mason's gonna find us a sugar daddy.
Well, that's-
With enough
be-
time.
Anything's possible
Yeah.
now, yeah.
You brought your checkbook, right?
Yeah.
Well, let me just, this has just sort of been on my mind, and I don't know whether I'm even like close to being right on this, but let's say we were to raise the millage from 9 mils to 12 mils. And assuming that that's the cap, then let's just say, for example, a year from now, we find out that the fire department budget, just to pick a wild example, is gonna go way up. And now we don't have a money to fund, we can't with the 12 mils take the 3 mils for the operation for the roads and 9 mils now won't cover what we need to do in terms of fire and.
Your essential services.
Yeah.
Essential services.
Operating
Yeah,
expenses.
does that mean,
library,
we have to
traffic
go to like an election to, I think it does, doesn't it? In order to,
If you're gonna override it, yes, you would have to do that.
so in other words, if you go from 9 mils to 12 mils, you're like cutting off all chance of being able to raise the budget without an election for anything else that comes up. Am I correct? in that?
Yes, but if you raise it to 12, just raise it. You're just collecting general fund revenue. It's not committed all to roads. So if, let's just say this happens and generated an extra $586,000. And all of a sudden, some unforeseen expense comes in. It could come out of that dollars, and that would just mean less of that money, say 486,000 would go to your roads.
Yeah,
I mean, not
no,
not necessarily advocating for this, I'm
Right.
just. That,
Right,
that
it's
money,
just-
if you raise the money, that doesn't necessarily have to go into that dedicated restricted
fund.
road fund.
right, except that, you know, if you're just talking out loud, I could be dead wrong, but I'm assuming if you told the voters that you were gonna raise their millage from 9 to 12, you said it's because we need money for the roads, and then, you know, you end up not using that money for the roads, you're probably not gonna have people who are real happy.
Probably so. Agreed.
So we can't restrict the money we get in from this extra millage?
If you were just to raise it like that, no.
Well,
No.
Didn't Birmingham do that? Birmingham had a 3%, 1%, I can't remember what it was, that they just voted on for next, for the senior center. And it's for 3 years.
So it's restricted.
That was a vote of the people, that's
Right.
correct. But
Right.
that, we're talking about not voting, just raising.
But I mean, well, if you're gonna go to the people and ask them about it and take a vote, that's maybe another thing to do. Then it becomes dedicated and it actually could be invested, earning interest and doing all sorts of things, so.
It's gonna be a hard sell.
Right, and I just don't wanna be in a position that we've. And again, it will be the council that makes the final decision, but I, as a council member, I don't wanna be in the position where we've spent ourselves up to the limit and then find ourselves not having enough to do the basic services and have to go for an election to like raise the rate later on beyond 12 mils in order to pay the police and the garbage and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, I'm looking at, well, just talking out loud again, I would prefer to go like 11.5 mils as opposed to 12, just so there was a little bit of wiggle room, but that's just me and I'm just one person and not, you know, not any great wisdom or anything like that.
If we did go for the state infrastructure bank, wouldn't we need a vote of the village to do that?
It's a loan, no.
But we'd have to go to the village for a bond.
You know what, let me just say something about that. I think.
I don't know, that's
I
what I'm
believe the
asking.
state infrastructure bank, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's basically non-motorized transportation projects. I could be wrong about that, I say I'm wrong, okay, all right. Just to borrow those dollars, you don't necessarily need to go to a vote of the people to borrow money into structure a fund.
What
of
about a
that nature.
bond though?
Yes, you probably would.
Okay,
A lot of times a bond is guaranteed or through a dedicated millage, which is most
but
often.
yeah,
When they probably have a lesser interest rate that way as well.
I don't know, that's why I asked.
Yeah. That would be correct. The rate would be lower.
Okay. Because you have a guaranteed money coming in to pay for that.
And that's dedicated or restricted, I should say.
And that's why I'm saying if we did go to the village for that money to have a backup plan in case it didn't fly. As I said, you know, we got 400 and something residents, of which half of them live on private roads. We don't know.
Yeah.
I can remember several years ago, maybe when I was on council, that the Birmingham Public Schools needed a sinking fund. And that's a bad term for the public, you know, right? But they needed the money and it went into a sinking fund. And actually the residents of Bingham Farms voted it down. And I think it's because they just didn't like the name. I don't know, I can't imagine. Because Birmingham we were going through a sort of recession and the schools needed the money. So anyway. It's all how you pose, you know, what the money you're looking for. Let's work on these until the next meeting. Kurt's gonna summarize and formalize, and I think that'll help us all. And if we can move on to the next agenda item, which is.
If I may throw one more thing in there, Bill. This doesn't have to happen by this year to go on the ballot. if we decide that there's another way to do it.
Yeah, if you don't need a referendum, no.
No, yeah, okay.
Village manager?
Okay, a couple of things. You all have a road commission for Oakland County brochure in front of you. This just came in the mail last week, and I thought it would be useful to pass out to you. It's interesting stuff, just read through it all, but the only reason I want you all to, I mean, I want you to read it at your leisure, but what I want you to come away with is on the second page of that number, but the page on the inside, there's a short little graph there. This just emphasizes the increased cost of materials, right? So RCOC cost comparison, 2016 versus 2023. You can see that asphalt between those 2 years has increased by 35%. I don't see that going down anytime soon. Maybe it won't be such a drastic increase, but it'll still be there. It just kind of bolsters what HRC was saying the other
5% a
day.
year.
So you feel free to read through the rest of it, but at your leisure. I just wanted to have that, just to point that out to you. The other thing is, if you shift gears and go to their estimates, a couple of different things that are maybe should be considered. On the very first page of your estimates, the very first column, very first graph at the top, you'll see items 14 and 14B. All right, one of these is the cost of resurfacing Timber Trail. That's at $586,000. The second alternative right below it, 14B, is converting Timber Trail to a walking path. That is at $325,000. Quite a difference there in cost. So I want to point that out to you all. There has been discussion in this village for decades, on and off, about closing or stopping or doing something to Timber Trail other than using it as a road. And that I think should be something that is considered in your recommendation overall.
Ken, is there, I drove that last week. Is there, I thought I saw only one driveway coming out in Timber.
That's correct.
right, there's only one.
Yeah,
So what would happen on that one driveway?
I believe you would close it west of that driveway to Bingham Road. That would be the
Yeah,
thought.
so it
Yeah,
come
because
up
it's
to
all the
that
way up in
driveway
one
and
end.
then the rest would be
They would
just
get
a-
access from Hickory Hollow, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
So I've asked Ken to talk to public safety personnel and see if they think there's a problem with that.
right.
If you need to have it open for fire trucks or ambulances, whatever, they'll know. So, okay, Kathy?
Just a little history. When village put water and sewer in here, the millage rate, they took out a 20-year bond and the village went to 20 mils. It was the vote of the people. But secondly, on Timber Trail, that's always been a thorn because of the one driveway on that road. Also, it was erroneously paved. It was originally put in as a construction road. And when the village went and paved the roads, the contractor just unilaterally went in. There was no drainage on that road. And so therefore, if you're looking at the price for asphalting it, you also need to add, if you're gonna do that, you better put the proper drainage in there if you're going to do it. And it only services that one driveway can easily exit out onto Hickory Hollow. So, you could put it, you could stop it right there. The reason there's that one driveway on there is that the original homeowner who built this home said, I don't like that my driveway would be on Old Orchard. So is it okay if I turn the house around and have it go out on Timber Trail? And the council allowed it. So that's why you have one driveway on Timber Trail.
Is that resident still in the house?
Yes, she voted yesterday.
No, that's not the same person who It's not the same person who built the home,
No.
they purchased it
But
after.
there's still somebody living there.
Yes, there is.
And I
Is
wanted
this,
to look up and say, you know, you are the one person.
problem.
And also,
Right.
if I may, there's a second factor, Ken.
Yes,
When you go on Timber Trail, you have all the utility poles up
Mhm.
and down Timber Trail. So that's gotta be another consideration because DTE will charge for each moved pole onto, you're gonna be going onto Old Orchard and onto Bingham Lane for those bridges.
Why do we have to move, why would we have to move?
well, I'm
those?
thinking that perhaps bollards could be put up and we could just still allow access. Only in emergency situations or in utility situations, but by and large, just traffic wouldn't be allowed. It's just a thought.
I agree.
Well, there's utility lines going my back property. There's no trail, there's no road there.
They would certainly maintain that easement. I mean, there's no way they would surrender the
Yeah, I
easement,
mean,
right?
And that could be crude, like in my backyard.
Yeah.
there's plenty of power lines that are not. on
That's correct.
roads.
That's correct.
So they have to be there.
I'm just-
Basically, this is just turning it into a gravel road. This-
No, it's not, it would not be a gravel road.
Yeah,
It would
it's
just be a path.
It would be putting crushed aggregate on it. It's just turning it into a crushed aggregate path.
Well, if you look at the front page, road length and cost for timber trail alternative not included in the totals at the bottom of the table.
Yeah.
So, and it just says path.
It says 325.
It says both. It says path, and then if a couple of blocks down, it says 325.
Yeah, I mean, in 14, 14 is the actual asphalt in the road. And
Right.
14B is just taking,
Right,
what I see here is, it's the asphalt crush and shape to 2 inch, right? So they're putting 2 inches of
Mhm.
aggregate on it, turning it into a gravel road again, basically.
it would be no longer used as a road.
Right, but like you said, with the bollard out there, that's removable
Right,
for
right.
access, utility
Right.
access or whatever, or
Mhm.
fire access.
right.
It
if there
would
was
be
none.
something similar to what you have 14 mile between Franklin and
Inkster.
Inkster, thank you.
I'll take your word for it. I'm not familiar with that section.
It's wide, but it's dirt.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
I see.
It's what we used to have.
So that would save us $170,000.
No, it'd save us a lot more than that.
What's
Going from 919 to 325.
No, but on the,
596 to 325. I think that 325 would come down because it's not gonna be a lot of.
I would imagine that.
I'm looking at this.
According to what
Okay,
Brad said.
then I was looking
It'll
at
be
this.
ditch digging.
Yeah, I'm looking at just the selective rehab would be 595,
Versus,
but you'd have to take 325 to make it.
Neighbor
into a path,
calculator,
so
yeah.
it'd be like 100, so-
Yeah, sorry,
okay,
That'd be great.
Just subtract this number from this number here.
again,
So
just
we
one
have
more
a,
thing.
so we have a
to-
concept.
Three
Think about
twenty-five,
it.
400 minus what?
So I think,
Five
as you brought
ninety-six,
up,
900.
that timeline.
Yeah.
Okay, D, we got some math going over here.
I got it, Bill.
Just show me which one, because you said you pointed it at.
So you actually have a number of different figures for this. As Kurt pointed out, you've got Timber Trail Road at short-term preventive,
The
at
difference,
almost 600,000.
the difference is $271,000. Between
Whereas,
those
yeah.
two figures, 14 and 14B.
Right, so that's $500,000.
That's a lot of money,
That's not
That's not
insubstantial.
Tennessee.
No,
Yeah.
that's still in Savior Court
$250,000, I'm sorry.
or Old Sage. Yeah,
So I just I wanted you all to see that. The other thing is, if you were to look. Hold on, let me turn there we go. Onto your estimates, that are on estimate number 2, estimate number 2A, and estimate number 3. At the bottom of the page, you'll see the word Sharrow. Share symbol, share the road and bike sign, signposts. There's a small total there on the right-hand side of about $6,000 on one estimate, same on the other one. I just wanted you all to know what this is. A Sharrow is like a lane. No, it's not a lane. It's a portion of a lane on a road that would have markings that will allow for bicycle and pedestrians. And it's a safety feature so that people walk and ride on this, whether they're going north or south, they're on the same side of the road, rather than walking on both sides of the road. And when there's no people or there's no bicyclists, a car is free to drive in that lane, or in that area. It's not widening the road at all. This is just adding some markings. It doesn't have to be a recommendation. If you so choose to trim it off, I think it would be a safety feature, and usually for not the kind of non-motorized transportation accessory, there is typically some grant dollars for that. And so but although the number is so insignificant that I'm not sure that it might not be worth the paperwork filling it out. I don't know. I just want you all to be aware that that's on there. And then finally, throughout the estimates, you will see a couple of things regarding signage. And that's very minor, but we're talking about replacing all the signs in the village too, if this were, as street by street, if this happens. Some of our stop signs are old and outdated and faded and rusty and whatnot. Some of the other sort of traffic safety signs and the mobile watch signs, same way. This could eventually, if we were to do this, we would want to replace some of those signs, or all of those signs, I should say. And not just the signage, but also the poles that they're on. So a lot of this, well, all of these estimates include those things. And I want you all to just be aware of that. It's a little bit more than just roads, there's some extra things. And that's all the reason I wanted to put them on there, point them out to you on the estimates. Finally, item C is speed humps. A resident on Bingham Road who not in the country right now, called me before he left and asked me to bring this suggestion at some point to the committee, so I figured this would be a good enough time to do it. None of these estimates is there any sort of call or recommendation for speed bumps or humps. This particular resident thinks it's a great idea, thinks it should be implemented, thinks it should be installed. If that's something that you would like to pursue, I can contact HRC and do that. However, I'll just give you my personal opinions on this. And this, you don't have to, please feel free to disregard if you don't like them. I hate them. And I'll tell you why. They were installed in my neighborhood and throughout the city where I live. Very recently, I don't like the fact that they're there on my street. I have to slow down, and I don't speed anyway, all right? But I have to slow down. Not only do they slow down just regular vehicles, they also slow down emergency vehicles when that's necessary. They do pose a challenge to plowing, which is another issue that I would have. There's an extra cost to installing them and to maintaining them. And finally, I do have a study here, and we're going to pursue getting this documented, detailed study. This was done in 2018, and the finding is that, and I'll just read the finding, it's brief. Initial results exploiting variation in the number of bumps traversed suggest speed bumps are associated with reduced residential property values. An estimated treatment effect of speed bump installation underscores the original findings. Finally, survey results imply that older homeowners and homeowners with children may favor speed bumps, but less than the disfavor of those who do not. Kind of odd wording, but if there's a slight decrease in property values, then maybe that's not worth pursuing. I know that other people do like speed bumps. It's up to you guys.
So can I ask a question? What is the problem we're trying to solve?
And that, there's no,
Speeding.
what, a resident has asked that this be discussed, and I'm telling you that you,
To solve what problem?
speeding,
Speeding.
Yeah.
So is there a problem with speeding then?
some people would say yes.
Some people have strong feelings about it.
Mhm,
We have one in Bingham Woods, it's removable
mhm,
in the winter, so the snow plowing issue
right,
can be addressed.
mhm.
But it's controversial, and people have cited that very
Yeah.
study.
Well, I think the
interesting. Some
person that cited
people-
it came to my office and I provided it to him.
I had a feeling there was a thread.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so, yeah,
Don't you have a personal experience,
a personal experience.
with speed bump?
Well, I just, they're on my road, on the street that I live on, and I don't like them at all. I mean, it just, there's different kinds of speed bumps, and the ones that are, there are permanent bumps, and there are temporary bumps that can come out in the wintertime. The issue with that is, someone you have to pay someone to remove them, you have to pay someone to install them. They have to be stored somewhere. So it's not just, well, do we have them or don't we have them? There's an ongoing cost to installing.
I think the modern solution that I've seen on roads recently, and quite a few roads around, not in Bingham Farms, but at Beverly Hills and around here is, and even up Southfield Road up in Birmingham, is they put this is how fast you're going against the
Mhm.
speed sign.
Mhm. We have that.
We have it on Bingham Road.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
And you still have speeding?
No. I drive Bingham Road every day, multiple times. I live on Bingham Lane. In Bingham Lane, they slow down because they have a curve. Well, and the first year, a guy didn't slow down. He ended up on top of my mailbox. But I did get to meet the police officers. We'd been there for 2 months. But on Bingham Road, it's 1 mile. And there are 2 stop signs on Bingham Road. So you can't traverse much of it without having to stop your car. And then when I'm out walking and I see a speeding car, I go, slow down. They all look at what? You know, a lot of people just aren't paying attention. They lose sight of it. But I don't think I see that many speeding cars.
Has there been a study?
Well, no, I don't think there's been a study, but I look at, from traffic safety standpoint, you always look at the number of pedestrian incidents, the number of vehicle incidents that happen on the road. And generally, you hate to think you're gonna lose a life before somebody pays attention, but I don't know, I'm not an expert in vehicle studies and so forth, but
But the lowering of property values might be a deterrent, maybe.
If I may on that, I think a number of years ago, it was proposed that we put it in. We went to the police department and the fire department, and they didn't want it because it would slow their vehicles down,
Right.
Mhm.
especially fire more than even police.
Yeah.
So it was, at that point, it was decided it just wasn't worth it.
And that was the homeowners association that decided that, or who?
You mean to put it in or to
No,
not,
to say it's not worth it.
the village?
That was
I
the
believe.
Oh, the village, okay,
Yeah.
That's the council.
okay.
No, what, we are going to, this is just an abstract of this scholarly journal study that I read to you. I would like to try to get the whole study. It costs like $37. We're gonna try to circumvent that in some way. And if I can get that, I will just provide it to you all as food for thought. I did promise this resident I would bring it up. And if if your recommendation is to stay silent, or if you choose to stay silent, that's fine. But I feel obligated to mention it to you all, and it just, again, food for thought.
Yeah. The only other thing I would suggest, maybe get a hold of Chief Roberts and or Tony Arbach and say, hey, guys, somebody has brought up speed bumps, what do you think? And I have a feeling they'll say, don't.
Probably right.
So with the public safety input and maybe with this document that we'll have in our hands next time, or maybe next time, I think we need to delay this discussion until the next
Yeah.
meeting. Okay, makes sense? Okay. We'll go around the table. Eric, you got anything to say?
I'm good.
My only comment would be, and I brought this up to council the other day, that, and maybe not tonight, but what you had brought up, maybe we need to have assignments for us to kind of do a little bit more deep thinking into, I mean, I'm sure all of us, it's gonna rattle around our heads anyway. But to come up with some specific recommendations as what you came up with, or what I might come up with and so forth. What you've done, maybe, okay, let's flesh that out kind of idea. I don't know if we need to do it now, but certainly. That way that we can bring a little bit more information to the table, so to speak.
Okay, well, as it fleshes out, let's dig in. a little
Yeah,
deeper.
absolutely, yeah.
Just a minor housekeeping point that came to me after our last meeting. Does administration have a way to contact HOA presidents on the private roads? If we wanted to communicate with the private road residents, do we have a list of contacts to reach them?
I don't have a list of every single individual. There's only 5 homeowner associations, but I
Okay.
mean, it's not hard to get. What are you asking for?
Well, is everybody in a homeowners association who's on a private road, or are some of them just?
No, we're in a homeowners association on Bingham Lane, that's not private.
That's the only non-private road. I mean,
Well, I'm
that's the only
talking about-
public road though, HOA,
Okay,
there's Woodland,
Woodland.
and then there's Outlands,
right,
Bingham Point and Bingham Woods. And I don't believe Cardinal Lane has a homeowners association. I'll double check.
so that'd be the only one that would,
Bingham
Court? Oh, he
Bingham,
said-
oh, Bingham Court, sorry, yes, you're right, Bingham Court also.
just we ought to formulate a way to reach those people when the time comes to do that.
Okay, that's a good point.
But I think one of these went out to everybody anyway, right?
Yes.
That did, as well as the newsletter,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. So they've
I
been
will
contacted.
assemble a list.
I forget Bingham Court myself all the time because it looks like a driveway when you go by. So,
Okay, you done? That's all?
Nothing for me. What's that?
Okay, I'm done. You guys want to have some final words?
No? I think
I
I'm
hope
good.
just, let me know again, just anything that you guys need. I'm willing to help any way we can.
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, do we have one?
You just did.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor? We're adjourned.